David, of course, we know that this is, I don't think there's any question it's the toughest schedule in the country, but we actually got some kickoff times and some networks announced here just in the last 3 or 4 days. So we're looking at, of course, that triple header on ABC that's going to be mammoth with Clemson, Georgia's the lead in, and then the Notre Dame Texas A&M game on the other bookend. But Miami, of course, at the Swamp for a 3:30 Eastern on ABC. Samford, that's an ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus game, week number 2. I know you love those cupcake games. You just think that there should just litter the schedule with those cupcake games. No, David is a ardent, let's play real college football type here. But Texas A&M, that one's slated for another 3:30 kickoff. That one back at the Swamp. So pretty imperative this team gets off to a good start with 3 consecutive home games. But again, that'll be a choice between ABC and ESPN as they determine that. So any thoughts about those time placements early in the schedule?
Hopefully y'all survive a 3:30 kickoff mark there in late August in the Swamp. It's going to be swampy, of course. So, yeah, that one, of course, a lot of people wanted that night game there, of course. But yeah, get a 3:30 kickoff there. Both teams, of course, both squads certainly be ready for that. The heat that will come with a 3:30 kickoff there in August. And Mark, I mean, what a big game, for both coaches coming into their third year. A lot of pressure on Billy Napier, a lot of pressure on Mario Cristobal, a lot of recruiting battles over the last few years between those guys. So certainly a big game. Both transfer quarterbacks. Cam Moore, his first year there. Graham Mertz, his second year at Florida. But just a lot of familiarity, of course, with the players, and 2 coaches really looking to get off to a good start in critical years for them. Big game to kick off the season there. And then Florida gets a little bit of a breather, as you said, night game at Samford. And then Texas A&M comes, Mike Elko, and his first conference game, I believe, it will be at the Swamp, and Florida's first conference game as well. And you got Mississippi State after that. I mean, Mark, there's a 4-0 start here possible for Florida. Certainly there is. But also, there's probably a 2-2 start staring them in the face as well. Florida should beat Samford. Florida, now don't get me wrong, have had trouble going on the road to Starkville in the past. And even with some better teams under Steve Spurrier and Ron Zook, and guys go there and lose games. We've seen it over the years. So, but with a first-year staff there, you'd expect Florida to go to Starkville and get a win there. So a 4-0 start, of course, with the back half of the schedule would be huge for Florida. Get off to a good start, get some kind of pressure off Billy Napier as well. Then you got a bye week in UCF, very, very tough schedule. Out of conference opponent there for Florida. If there is pressure on Billy Napier, one way to ramp that up, Mark, is to go lose to Gus Malzahn in Central Florida. Look, Florida's got to play all the teams, all the Power 4 teams in the state of Florida: Miami, Central Florida, and Florida State to close the season. So Florida, if they go undefeated there, 3-1, could kind of claim somewhat of a state championship or whatever. But that's going to go a long way in what the pressure is for Billy Napier. What do you do against those rivals in your state? And then, of course, the rest of the schedule there as well. Mark, that road trip to Tennessee, I think, is probably the most worrisome game in that first few games for me, or that first half of the Gator schedule. But can't overlook Kentucky. I mean, Florida's lost 3 straight against Kentucky as well. And then another bye week before they go to that gauntlet of Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. I mean, Mark, those last 5 games, all 5 of those teams were fighting for conference championships, college football playoff spots toward the end of last year. Now Florida has to play all 5 of them in a row. So you hope, if you're for Florida's sake, look, it is a tough schedule. Some have said the toughest schedule ever. Maybe some teams don't live up to that expectation, but it will still be up to Florida to take advantage of those situations. But certainly a tough schedule. And Mark, I think the way I look at it is embrace it. I mean, to me, it's year 3. This is Billy Napier's roster. It's his team. He's built it in his image. If this thing is headed in the right direction, we should see improvement no matter what the schedule is.
And the other kickoff and network announced the Georgia game. That's either going to be an ABC or ESPN. So just to enlighten some folks out there, the deal is that they can set up the first couple of weeks of the season, and then some of the real marquee matchups, whether that's Ohio State, Michigan, they can lock in. But basically, it's a week and a half determination prior to that Saturday where the networks determine, okay, these are the best matchups. This is where we're going to put the ESPN game versus the ABC versus ESPN2 versus the SEC network and so forth. That happens on the Monday prior to the weekend before those particular matchups. So we will see those play out the rest of the season. Is there some kind of backstory about playing all three schools? So I love that as a college football fan, playing the three Florida schools. But my goodness, and not to defend or make an excuse for Florida football, but having always have to play Florida State. So let's understand that we got 4 teams that in the former SEC Eastern Division that have rivals in the ACC. Well, Florida's got the one that is the most consistently an elite program that they have to face each and every year. So they're going to catch back flack if they don't schedule somebody else. If they schedule 3 cream puffs and just rely on Florida State as being the game non-conference, people are going to criticize, oh, you're not scheduling anyone else. But how many teams go out there and schedule somebody else? And here we've got 2 others in Miami and UCF, and all in state. Is there any kind of backstory to scheduling kind of the state championship approach this year?
I don't think so, Mark. I think it was just Scott Strickland, for whatever reason, putting all these games in one year for Florida. Now, granted, a lot of these were settled before the SEC expanded, before Texas and Oklahoma came in, and the SEC scheduling got blown up. A lot of those were already in place there. But, Mark, I was just noticing when you had that schedule up, I don't know where FBS Schedules gets their rankings. They had some rankings beside those schools. But if I'm not mistaken, I saw the last 7 opponents there for Florida all had a number beside them. Now, I don't know if that was last year's rankings and it being based off of that, but no, it can't be because Georgia's number 1 there. But there's a 16 besides Tennessee. There's a 23 beside Kentucky, a 1 beside Georgia, a 4 beside Texas, 12 LSU, 6 Ole Miss, 15 Florida State. I'm assuming those are rankings from somewhere.
Maybe an ESPN FPI or something.
But there you go. That just shows you how tough Florida's schedule is. I mean, their final 7 opponents, according to this ranking here, are all ranked. And the last 5 are all in the top 15. So,
and I'm going to clarify before I get a comment either in the chat or later to the comment section when somebody says, well, South Carolina's got to play Clemson every year. I understand Clemson's been better than Florida State for the most part in the last 10 years, but I'm just speaking historically. There's no comparison between those other schools that have to be played and Florida State every year for Florida. So,
hey, Mark, we've heard that too. You know, Florida playing Miami this year. And we've heard, well, why doesn't Florida play Miami every year? What school do you know in the SEC goes out and schedules 2 Power 5 permanent opponents? Now, playing Miami every now and then, sure, do it. But nobody goes out there and schedules 2 permanent Power 4 opponents. No, nobody does it. So while Florida gets flack for not playing Miami every year and Florida State every year, I'll never get it when the schedule's already been tough enough anyway.
Nobody in the SEC does it. The only team I can think of is USC's got Notre Dame every year. Then they go out and grab somebody else, but they don't play in the SEC. Yeah.
But, and they don't want to play an SEC team this year according to reports.
Yes. They apparently wanted to get out of that one for sure. David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Man, it's always a good time and appreciate David stopping by, breaking things down on the Florida football front. And maybe Billy Napier's swan song, or maybe a resurgence in Gainesville that people aren't expecting. It should be intriguing one way or the other. And again, Gators Breakdown, it's right here on YouTube and your favorite audio platform. David, this was apropos you kicking us off for our SEC run here this summer, so we so much appreciate you stopping by, sir.
All right, Mark, let's do it again.